Are you ready to get casual? Grab your favorite adult beverage or combustible plant and join us for our roundtable TTRPG discussion. Oh yeah, it's time for Casual Friday. And now, here are your hosts.
If you're not ready to get casual, then you're in the wrong place. This is Casual Friday, and we are the Landlocked Warlocks, and we're here today to talk to you about tater pigs like Dungeons and Dragons and other tater pigs and what's going on in the tater pig industry. I am one of your hosts. I am GM Jim Heskett from Wizards and Wordslingers, and up there is...
I'm Brad Wolf from Diarden.
And I'm Ryan Doyle with your very special guest, Dolly, who typically refuses to be exploited by me for views, but look at how adorable and tiny this dog is. I love her so much. Sorry.
Does Dolly have their own Instagram page?
No, she should. She has the catalog of photos to support one for sure.
Nice. So today on the show, we are going to talk about a bunch of stuff. We are going to talk about the new D&D starter set, Heroes of the Borderlands. We got some screenshots, so there's some juicy info. We're going to tinfoil hat a little bit, do a little bit of zoom in, a little enhance. We are going to talk about the Not D&D podcast. Not another D&D podcast? No, it's not that one. We're going to talk about Mr. Ernie Gygax, who recently passed away, just briefly. You probably already heard that. That happened like right before the show last week, so we did not get that breaking news. We're going to talk about hustling in the Tater Big community, some videos that came out this week about the economics of Dungeons and Dragons, and a video from Bob World Builder about Kickstarters. It's pretty interesting. And we're going to talk about Terraforming Mars is getting its own Tater Pig. And for our main roundtable discussion, we're going to talk about TPKs. We put up some polls earlier this week with some social results, and we want chat to jump in and talk to us with your opinions. And then if there's time, there'll be some other stuff that I'm not going to mention because there might not even be time. With all this action-packed content we have going on Casual Friday. That was my dramatic pause.
Nice.
So first up, we're going to talk about the Heroes of the Borderlands D&D starter set. This is going to be, what seems to me, in the final leg of the 2024 core rule quadrant. You have the 3 core books and a starter set, which is what you really need for a not new edition of Dungeons and Dragons. Well, this is coming out what, like October, September?
July? No, July's the Dragon book. I think August is the box.
Okay, so it's still a ways off, but they've started giving us some teasers about it. From what I understand, it's not like a remake of Keep on the Borderlands. It's like a sequel set later in the same timeline in that world.
That was my understanding, yeah.
Yeah, which I think is smart. Because if you remake Keep on the Borderlands, you are just going to upset people.
Right.
That's probably what you're going to get for that.
I think, to be fair, whatever they do, they're going to upset people.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
Or people will be upset. I don't know, the causal chain there is a little fuzzy, but yeah, people will be upset no matter what happens.
Yeah, we live in the day and age where no matter what you do, someone can find a way to get upset about it. That's
100%. So, hey, Nacho, good morning. Let's zoom into some screenshots of some kind of interesting stuff.
Hey, before we do, can we talk about the cover art?
Yes, we can. What would you like to say, Brad?
Well, Peter from Tales of Elsewhere said, it looks familiar, and it absolutely does. There's definitely elements of the 1983 basic set with the long-haired warrior face to face with the red dragon, and then the keep on the Borderlands in the background. That's the keep back there, that like purple mountain, purple castle, is definitely an homage to the back cover art of the original Keep on the Borderlands module. So that is harkening back to 2 very specific old school, or not old school, but products from way back in the day.
In the original art, did it also look like the dragon was presenting to the warrior?
No, the 1983 box set, the dragon very much looks like it's about to like devour the warrior.
Because this could, be interpreted several ways.
Yeah, this dragon doesn't look nearly as big or as aggressive.
Anyway, so that's a nice bit of trivia there. So this box set is going to come with a bunch of stuff. It's really supposed to be a starter kit in the real sense of the word, that it's going to come with an adventure with a condensed set of rules. That adventure is broken into different chunks. And it also comes with a bunch of tokens, a bunch of cards, a bunch of pre-made stuff. And so we're getting some glimpses of some of this. Like you see a spell card at the top left that says Burning Hands. And Haldrick, I'm not sure what that is. Maybe an NPC. But then you see you've got monster cards. You've got a Knoll Warrior over on the right side with, you can see the art on one side of the card, and then on the, what I assume is the back of a Goblin Warrior card there down at the left. So they're giving you a bunch of things that make it, I've seen a lot of comments already, people saying that it feels like a board game. And I say, that's smart.
It is.
That is smart. Because if you got a starter set for first-time players, if it's a starter set for first-time players, exactly 0 of them have played Dungeons & Dragons before, but I'll bet most of them have played Monopoly or Scrabble before, right? So board gamification is smart for new people. Here we get some pretty interesting stuff when we see the close-up of a character sheet. You can see the ability modifier section is really grouped by the 6 abilities, showing you the save and the specific skills that go underneath it. That's pretty smart. They don't show the ability scores at all. It's just mods.
Right.
Just mods, which is smart. If you're not going to use the scores in gameplay, get rid of them. They don't serve a purpose. So you see spell cards here for Shocking Grasp and Bless. And then, so the most interesting thing on this page over here, if you look on the right, under the Playing a Wizard section, it says, on a short rest, regain 4 hit point tokens. So there's the short rest mechanics are just very Baldur's Gate 3. Voing, you get 50% of your hit points back. And move the power token below to an empty token space on spellcasting. Optional. What do we think that means?
I think you're getting the spell slot back, right? I think that's like shorthand for a spell slot. So on a short rest, you're getting one of your spell slots back. I think that's what that means.
So imagine if it's a starter box set, maybe if it's only level 1 to 3, they don't have spell slots of first, second, third level. They just call them power tokens. Like maybe there's only for access to first level spells.
Right. Yeah. That's my interpretation. So do you guys remember when they first showed off Daggerheart?
Mm-hmm.
And they had cards for like your class and race and abilities. I mean, this is that. I mean, Daggerheart's not doing that anymore. They went away from that model of like, cards and tokens to build your character sheet physically. But this has embraced that type of design, and it's very similar to what they showed off at the beginning of Daggerheart.
I think this is good. I think this will help people play to be able to put spells on and magic items on their character sheet and be able to literally see it in front of them.
Yeah, and I think it's also going to be fun for kids, right? And the kids will get into it and lose it, and then you're going to have to go buy another copy. So more power to Hasbro's marketing for that.
Yeah. Any more thoughts, or we want to move on to the next screenshot?
We can move on, but it looks like a Hasbro product, right? More than a WotC product. And that's, speaking of things that are going to upset people, I'm sure that will. But like, if you roll up on a motorcycle and you're like, I don't like the training wheels that this kid's using, like, you're just a jerk, man. Like, this is an on-ramp. to D&D, simplifying things, identifying like the pain points of like how many freaking conversations have I had explaining how spell slots are different than spell levels or different than character levels. It's like, look, here's we'll call them powers. You know, here's a chit, here's a little token. Like make it as accessible at first as possible. I'm here for it as long as they're being smart about it, and we'll see what it costs. That's my one concern with all of these goods in a box. But yeah, here's hoping it's closer to 25 than 50.
How much was Stormwreck Isle? That was the last one that sold in Target,
Oh,
right?
yeah, I want to say like 2025 ish, but and inflation's a hell of a drug, so I don't know. Maybe the baseline should be 30.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure I remember seeing Icespire Peak and Phandalin in Target for 19.95 each, which was 10 years ago. If anybody in chat knows what was the game store price on Stormwreck Isle? Game store or Target? Was Stormwreck Isle in Target? I don't even know for sure if it
I
was.
think it came out in Target first that time. It was a whole thing
Oh, I think you're right. There wasn't
because
like a Target exclusive.
I was going to send one to Matthew Perkins. I was going to send one to Australia, which might be illegal now because of tariffs. But
Who knows? Um, Moving on to our next, we got a couple more screenshots here. This one shows a lot of the card-based stuff in the Caves of Chaos Wilderness, Keep on the Borderlands. Those are the 3 separate books. So we get so zooms out on some of the maps that you get. You see, I like this map of the keep here. I like being able to put down a non-tactical map in front of people to say, this is generally what the area looks like. You get cards for potions, for magic items, for spells, and I really, really like the cards for the NPCs. They had those in Icespire Peak, and they were very good. They did not have them in Lost Mine Phandelver. They did not have those in Phandelver, which I felt like that was missing. But Icespire Peak was like a much chunkier starter box. It had tokens and not nearly as much stuff as this Heroes of the Borderlands, but it was a nice chunky.
and they kind of framed it differently because that was the essentials kit. It wasn't the starter kit, so it did feel like an upgrade. I think it might have been a higher price point, but like there was actually progressively less stuff in the box. I got like a later box, and there were fewer like the tokens or whatever.
So first you start, then you get essential.
Then it's just, yeah, essential was like the one step up. It went to level 6 this time, you know, like but there was more in it. And I will say the Pathfinder 2E starter set put all of the D&D boxes to shame, just the amount of stuff in that box. This looks a lot closer to that, honestly.
One nice thing about Icespire Peak is that there were 2 follow-up adventures on D&D Beyond, so you could play it to level 11.
Yeah.
All right, that's the last screenshot. That's all the screenshots.
Well, one thing about this screenshot I was going to say is there's 3 different adventure books. So one thing that seems to be possible here is you could take turns DMing. Like if you had a new group of players, everybody's learning how to play, and one could DM the adventures from the Wilderness book, one could DM the adventures from Cadence of Chaos book, and the other could run the Keep and the social encounters, right? That would be an interesting way to approach the game, and I'm wondering if that's why they're in separate booklets like that.
Well, in the video, didn't Justice say something about replayability?
He did, so I'm
Which is
curious.
a weird thing to mention for TTRPGs. You don't usually think of them as replayable like a video game.
Not like an adventure, yeah. It's interesting. So what I see, well, I mean, Brett, I think that's a very cool idea, and I hope it's there. And like, why isn't there more of that, like rotating GM sort of situations? It's like GM list things. But looking at this picture, looking at the 3 books broken down, I see the 3 pillars of play. I see keep on the border. Like the keep is social, and then wilderness is travel, exploration, and then the caves is combat, fighting monsters,
Dungeon
um,
crawl.
dungeon
Mm-hmm.
crawl. In the video that I think accompanied this article, maybe something else I saw, the guy at the game expo with like the promo demo copy taps the Caves of Chaos book, says this is all the dungeon master has to read. It's only like 10 pages. And I did not like hearing that, that there's only 10 pages covering the Caves of Chaos. Now, maybe that's not true. Maybe that's inaccurate,
Hmm.
but that doesn't feel like a lot of content unless it is super stripped down and simplified because so much more of it is on the cards.
Or if, like they did with the Essentials kit, if they're going to have a follow up, like downloadable version of Caves of Chaos that goes into the other layers of the caves. Because the original design, there were like, what, 8 or 9 different, cavern zones, right? So that would be
And then
interesting.
there's, damn, what is it? There's the thing on the hill. There's like the old, like the last adventurers that cleared this place out built a castle up there, but now they're gone. There's like a follow up to keep on the Borderlands too.
Mhm.
So I wonder if this, and from
Yeah.
a business standpoint, and that yes, I recognize that profit is evil, right, everybody? But there's a really smart business incentive to take your baby D&D player and have them sign into D&D Beyond and give them free stuff like a baby bird and get them addicted to digital dice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there was also one of the lower levels, one of the more extensive caverns was the like evil cults, at the bottom of the Caves of Chaos, if I'm remembering correctly. So you could have that as a separate adventure, as well. So they could like this could focus on like the orc, hobgoblin, bugbear, and goblin caves, right?
Hmm.
I
Mike
see
calls it
gnolls, I see
the
lizard
sorry,
folk. No, go for it. That's a very insightful comment, actually.
the Christmas morning test. Yeah, somebody's
Yep.
going to be getting this on Christmas morning and want to open it up and play right there in their PJs.
Yep. Yep. And that's important for a starter set. The Yeah, in the original Keep on the Borderlands, the lizard folk were in the swamp, so I'm presuming they're going to be part of the wilderness, right? Because in the original adventure, the wilderness section had your lizard folk and a group of bandits, and then like a hermit hut. Those were all the components in the wilderness part of the original. I'm curious how closely they stick to that.
Hmm. Well, we'll find out in a few months. Expect to see a ton of videos about this starter set from all of your favorite YouTubers. Because starter sets are a cash cow. And we know this because a lot of people are searching for how to run the starter set on Christmas morning. That's when they're doing it too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of been a bit on this show for a little while that we have to have at least one non-Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro product related news topic that we discuss every week. And this week, what's funny is that I discovered from a post on EN World this podcast called Not D&D. There's another podcast called Not Another D&D Podcast, which is an actual play, which is great, which is one of the best ones. I listen to their show every week. But Not D&D is not even a new podcast. I looked it up, and the newest episode is like 114. So they've been doing this for a while. And let's see if we can... No, we don't want to go to YouTube.
And it's like a scheduled live. They like scheduled all their episodes out, which good for them. They're organized, but it was confusing to click on.
Yeah, it's hosted by some British person named Jessica, I think. Pleasant voice, which is important for podcasting. The quality of the host voice is incredibly important to me. It's maybe even the main concern when I listen to podcasts. And how much banter they have. Too much banter, can't do it. Yeah, so that's the Not D&D podcast. Sorry, what's that?
You're throwing stones from a glass house, my friend.
We have the appropriate amount of banter.
Do we? Hey, Chad. How's the banter level?
Our intro's only 18 seconds, and we're talking about the news within a minute.
Tight ship.
Tight ship. So that's the Not D&D podcast. I assume you guys haven't listened to it.
I have not.
I'll take 7.9. Thank you, Jordan. I was so confused that like it's not another D&D podcast, and it like my brain broke trying to process that this morning.
Indeed. So the next thing on our news is that, like I mentioned at the top of the show, last Friday it was announced that Ernest Gygax had passed away from, it just said, health complications. I guess he had been ill for a while. He had left the new TSR company a couple years ago and had been kind of in the background since then. If you've ever used Tensor's floating disk, then you're using a spell that was named after him, Tensor Ernest. It's an anagram. Ernie got himself into some trouble a few years ago with some things he said, and he started 2 different companies called TSR, which is weird. I'm going to make a video about that. I had the title, and so nobody steal this title. I'm going to tell you the title. I think it's a really good one. Ernie Gygax and the Tale of the 2 TSRs. It's going to be a historical video, so it won't do well at all, but I don't care. I'm going to make it anyway, because I love doing those videos.
And he started TSR 2 and then 3, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's ultimately 3, but he's responsible for 2 of them.
He started TSR 2 in the early 2010s with his brother Luke, and the purpose of founding the company was that they started a new magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And the magazine, they sold the magazine for a few years. It folded, and then it was in 2021 they started the brand new TSR, and then he went on that interview tour and said all those things that got everybody mad at him, and then the new TSR folded in 2023.
It's a family resemblance. I'm not going to upset all the grognards, but
The third version of TSR, was that the one that tried to make a new Star Frontiers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they were the new TSR, the 2021. No, one of the TSRs. I don't remember. I haven't done my research yet. I have the title. I told you. Yeah, one of them published Top Secret New World Order, the newest version of the Merle Rasmussen role-playing game that you may not know this, but you might have heard of that Top Secret from the 80s. They've been still making new editions this whole time. Last one came out in 2016. And Star Frontiers, but Hasbro put the kibosh before they could make Star Frontiers. Too many TSRs, indeed. Well, rest in peace, Ernest. Thank you for your contributions to the hobby. You were one of the playtesters of original Dungeons & Dragons. Next up, you should know that you should go subscribe to the Landlocked Warlocks. Smash that like button. Did the like button just light up below when I said that? Smash the like button. Did it light up? I don't know what triggers that on some videos. You ever seen that? When they say hit like and subscribe and the like button goes whoom down below?
I've seen it. I have no idea how it works.
I don't know. If we just made your like button flash 12 times, my apologies. Yeah, but go subscribe to the Landlocked Warlocks. It's what's happening. Next, I've got a video coming out in a couple days that I want to tease a little bit, but who knows about the Triangle Agency? This is my new favorite TTRPG. It's the TTRPG of the moment, and it's wild. It's described as, what does it say? Chilling horror, wacky comedy, emotional truth that can only come from working for reality's most trustworthy corporation, 333 years running. It's like Severance and D&D mixed. It's like Office Space and Ghostbusters. And this is one of the wildest rule books I've ever read. The rule book itself has got to win awards for design. Like, look at this. It's written entirely in world. You see there is the frozen yogurt calendar. It's written entirely in world, but there's all these interjections and there's twists and there's twists in the lore and the mechanics as you go along and you learn what's really going on. I've got a whole video about this coming out on Sunday. But this is going for the shelf. This is a beautiful book. It's just got crazy crap all over it, and it's written like a new employee manual, so it's very in-world. Very fun. Very wild. And so, yeah, that's Triangle Agency. You guys, have you know anything about Triangle Agency?
I've not heard anything about it, so that's news to me. And what I'm hearing you say is get the hardback, not the PDF.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great in hardback. Severance has start paying you some ad revenue. Well, maybe they will. Hopefully they will. That would be nice. They can sponsor
No
my video on
spoilers.
Sunday.
I didn't watch it last night. Tune in next week for our All Severance podcast.
Yeah, I haven't watched last night's episode either. Last week's was mind-blowing. Okay. Moving on to the more news section of the show. On Monday of this week, we ran a one-shot with our one-page one-shot crew. And we're going to be premiering that video in 3 weeks from today. So why am I still talking about it? You're going to forget everything I'm saying today between now and then. So I'm going to talk about a couple of lessons from the game that I thought were interesting. The Mimic Cafe is a one-shot that I wrote for 5e, and it's for about 5th level adventurers, and I assume 4 to 6 hours. It's an extremely beefy one-shot. There's a lot to do there. And when I was running it on Monday, I set out with the goal of how do I run this whole thing in 2.5 hours. And so what I tried to achieve was starting off with the goal of when you run a one-shot and you run out of time, you're going to have to cut some stuff. And what usually happens is you don't know you're running out of time until you've already run out of time. And so then you have to cut things from the end, which is usually the good part, right? Mm-hmm. So I really set out with the goal of cutting from the beginning and the middle. And so what did we do? Like we started off with everyone introduced their characters and then would roll a d6. And if they got a high number, they would learn a rumor about the location they're going to. So normally in a one-shot, you might have everybody start off at the place, and then they get the mission, and then they might try to get some intel on it, right? And all that's going to take an hour, hour and a half of your roleplay time. So I thought if we just start off with, you have a chance to learn a rumor about where you're going, and then as soon as we were done with that, plop everyone exactly right outside the dungeon. And the other thing was... one thing I did is that it takes place in a cafe, and I wanted the cafe to be bustling and full of people, and we were playing on a VTT, so I had a lot of tokens for just random NPCs, and I named these tokens NPCs, so they're all the same token, and then there were some other tokens that were individuated and had names. And it would be really easy to look at that and go, well, that's immersion breaking. And you guys can tell me if it was immersion breaking or not. My thought was sometimes clarity is more important than immersion. And by highlighting the NPCs that you probably don't need to waste time talking to versus the NPCs you can talk to, maybe that'll help cut out a lot of that beginning and middle to say for the end. And then the final thing was, I'm not going to spoil it, but I did have to set an internal trigger to when I would launch the end game. And I had to be a little railroady to make that happen because I knew we started at 6 p.m. At 8 p.m., I have to trigger this module's end game. But I also knew that was the only way we were going to be able to get to an end point was if I pushed things a little bit. And especially because also I wanted to showcase the end of the adventure, right? Because I'm not just running it, I'm also promoting it for anyone who might be watching. So that was my personal post-mortem. You guys have anything to add to that?
No, I think you accomplished all of those goals, and I didn't find the NPC lack of names immersion breaking. It was very clear why you did what you did, and as a player, I kind of appreciated it. It was kind of the equivalent of the video game, right? Where like the characters you're supposed to talk to have a little like arrow over their head, or a little glow about them, right?
Right.
So yeah, I appreciated that. The and then there was another thought I had in there. Oh, on the rumors thing. The one thing I've done with rumors when I'm running a one shot, or even if it's just the first game of a new adventure, I'll write down the rumors on little cards and I pass them out. So it's kind of random who gets what rumor. Um, and I'll do that with NPCs too. So sometimes I shuffle and everybody gets a rumor, everybody gets an NPC, or sometimes it's random. One person gets a rumor, the other person gets an NPC. So like you have a little note about an NPC, a person you already know, that's going to be in the first scene or two.
I like that a lot because players like getting folded up pieces of paper from the dungeon master. And when you're playing online, pulling a player into like a private chat room, they love that. And the other players, they hate it and they love it because they're like, what's happening? What does the piece of paper say?
Yep. The other thing you can do too, kind of just speaking of like giving pieces of paper out to your players, if you're running a mystery, like, let's say it's a werewolf mystery, you hand everybody a separate sheet of paper, but everybody's paper says, you are not the werewolf. Which of course implies that somebody is, right? But nobody is. So it just ramps up the tension and the paranoia right from the beginning.
Nice. Make them turn on each other. Yes. Yeah. Phil says one-shots are not sandboxes. Yeah, I tend to agree. Especially when you're making something for public consumption.
Yeah.
And I will say, I did not feel railroaded.
Oh, good.
Like,
I didn't either. No.
Yeah, I did not see you be like, well, time's up. Now it's time to do this. Like it did feel like a natural progression of events. I'm a big advocate for acknowledging that metagaming is inevitable and there's like a certain acceptable amount that we all have to get on the same page about. Like pretending that you can absolutely install a Severance chip in your brain. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep talking about Severance. To separate out like what you, the player, knows from what you, the character, knows. Like impossible. There is that difference there, and acknowledging it and working with it instead of pretending it's not there or working against it is super valuable. You could have put 3 NPCs in that room. It's like, okay, cool. But you put 20 NPCs in that room and it felt like a bustling cafe. And by changing the tokens and labeling like NPC versus their names, it was clear to the players that these are the ones we're going to interact with and have interesting results from. And the rest are background actors that serve a purpose, but they're less resolved. And there's 5 people in the room. The dungeon master has the most control, but we all have to agree that we're trying to land this plane in 2.5 hours before we all run out of fuel. So the player is also on the hook to a degree to keep things moving towards the end and not pretend that we're in a sandbox when we have 2.5 hours to play.
Yeah. And one thing I've done to do that when you're playing Theater of the Mind, you're not on a VTT where you can clearly see the name of every character, is have the NPCs in little friend groups, right? And then you have one spokesman for the group. So it feels like a crowded, theater, or a crowded, museum, or, tavern, or whatever you're trying to run. But everybody's kind of in these groups. And then when the players interact with them, you have like the speaker of the group.
Huh.
It's like the Greek horrors, like swarms of NPCs.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah,
so
I'll have like an adventure.
Highlight this.
Oh yeah, apparently. So I looked at it a couple days ago, and it said that it was on sale for Dungeon Masters Day, which apparently I guess it's still Dungeon Masters Day a couple days later. So yeah, if $1.99 was breaking the bank, then $1.59 should be a lot easier to swallow.
I will say, it was a blast as a player. I read through a lot of it after the fact. But yeah, well worth. I would pay $1.99 or even more for that adventure. And we could have. I easily could see that being a. There's a lot of like that could have been a two shot. I could see
Sure.
that. I could see us getting a lot more playtime out of that adventure. There was a lot of meat on that bone.
But it's not the 2-page two-shot club. It's the 1-page one-shot club. We have very strict rules. No, we don't. We've already broken our own rules several times on both of those dimensions.
And maybe this is a spoiler, but I think one of the other core things to make your 5-6 hour adventure into a 2.5 hour adventure that was originally built for 5th level D&D was not running it using the system. Combat went a lot smoother and faster, and
Yeah.
the whole play style went faster because of the system choices you made to start.
Yeah, I don't think we would have been able to condense it into 2.5 hours if we had been
That
using
that
5e
last
mechanics.
that last 20-30 minutes would have taken 2.5 hours.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and that's an example of like you can grab any adventure and run it in with any system, just about. You know, this whole idea of like how do I convert this module to this system? Like conversion is a red herring. There's my little micro rant. You can take any system, any module adventure, and you can smash them together and run it. Like, don't overthink it.
Yeah, I don't think I'd even mentioned that, but it was a 5e one shot, but we didn't use 5th edition rules. We used Roll for Shoes, basically. A modified version of Roll for Shoes, and we're modifying it further. Stay tuned. But so that one in itself was kind of fun because I just told these guys, make a fantasy type character. You are a seasoned adventurer. You can have whatever powers, abilities you want, magic items, it doesn't matter. Because no matter what you do, you're still going to have a 50% chance of failure on the D6. So, doesn't matter what you say the magic item does, it's still got a 50% chance of failing. And that's kind of freeing. You got to design. Brad made a tornado monk.
I was basically Avatar: The Last Airbender in a dwarf's body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're ready to move on. So yeah, that the Mimic Cafe is going to debut on this channel 3 weeks from today, and we will stay after at varying degrees and hang out in the chat during that live stream. So you can come watch it on the show, and then you can watch it on the other show right after. Same place. You don't even have to change your stuff. I don't know what I'm talking about. So the next thing that we are going to talk about, though, is there have been a couple of videos released recently about the economics of Dungeons and Dragons and the tabletop role-playing game hobby. It's a video by, oh, God, what's his name? What's the name? I'm going to have to click on it.
Bob Worldbuilder did one, and then there was the other one.
Phil Edwards.
There it is.
So looks like he's not a dungeon tuber. He's an economist, kind of like a hobbyist economist guy. And so he talked to a bunch of different people, including Ginny D and Jasper William. He talked to Ginny D about being a YouTuber. He talked to Jasper William Cartwright about being an actual play performer. He talked to some very interesting long-haired guy about being a professional dungeon master. He talked to somebody from Cantrip Candles, which I thought was one of the more interesting parts. Is this guy? There's a company called Cantrip Candles out of LA that they make D&D flavored candles. He said it's easier to pretend I'm an elf if I smell like the forest.
I get it.
And yeah, there's just some other interesting things I took from this video. Start Playing. They interviewed the guy who created StartPlaying.games. And I learned that Start Playing takes 15% from their pro DMs, which is a great rate. I sell books on Amazon, and Amazon takes 30%. So 15% that's a very cool company. They talked to TPK Brewing, this kind of weird hybrid business in Portland, where they do long-term homebrew campaign game nights and they pair beer with the narrative.
You can just say business in Portland. It's a little shorter.
So, yeah, so these people sign up to play a whole campaign, and it was $250 for 6 sessions, and they get a free paired beer during each time. And it's all completely homebrew with specialized merch related to the campaign that they get as part of it. And what else is interesting? Matt Colville, they interviewed Matt Colville in this economics video. And I thought it was interesting that he said in the future, they want to take good community draft steel products, add art, and put them in their own store. Which is interesting because on the DMs Guild, we've heard tale of wizards going after people who have done well in the DMs Guild, and then they usually get them to make a product for wizards, right? But Matt Colville was saying they will take existing products that have already sold and add new art, and then give them a boost by selling them in the store, which is interesting. If every self-published author in the world out there thinks that if they sell their book well, they'll catch the attention of a literary agent and an editor who want to snap it up, and that never happens. If you sell really well, they want your next book because they figure your current book has already reached its market potential. Anyway, what did you guys have thoughts on that first video before we dive into Bob's analysis?
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting to see all the different ways that people were, turning their hobby into, a side hustle or even like full-time jobs. Like that was impressive.
Yeah, it was cool to be like, just to see the diversity of the community, right? Because it is very much a community. And part of that is like, I haven't heard this term in a long time, actually, but cottage industry, right? Now we say side hustle, I guess, is a lot cooler than like who lives in a cottage, but like nerds who like nerd shit and The Hobbit live in cottages. Like, why are we saying cottage industry? Anyway, it's like I used to be like, I think it was like I'm a scientist and now I make dice in a very exacting chemical epoxy way, and like this 100 psi of pressure, make sure it's perfectly balanced. And then like I'm an actor in LA, but I make candles. Yeah, and just like how many different kinds of skill sets and interests can all find a home and like flourish in a sense. Like there's enough people who are interested in all of these different aspects to support some degree of economics, right? Like no one's except for Matt Colville maybe is crushing it, but there are, I don't know. There's the 3D print guy, right? Is giving away all the STLs for free, but he had like 8,000 patrons or something. There's just so many different little silos and niches here, and we all overlap and interact and exchange, and it's just really cool. And this is also the first video where I feel like I could send that to my mom, and like that would save me like hours of explaining what I'm trying to do. Like this was a for everyone sort of thing, and it wasn't about the OGL or whatever piece of like pop media. It was like very much the heart of the D&D community in an accessible way that wasn't just talking to people who have been thinking about this for the last decade or so.
It reminds us that we're all bugs living on this giant tree of the tabletop industry. We're all part of this ecosystem. We're the little bugs interacting with the xylem and the phloem of the tree, and somebody cuts the tree down, we're all in trouble. But for now, we're all thriving and growing on this giant, on the different branches of this hobby.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of is the tree thriving, that's what the other video that Bob the World Builder looked at is like, really answering what's his name's Ben Riggs article from like a year or two ago about how the golden age of D&D has come to an end, right? And Bob kind of proved that wrong with like all these Kickstarters in the TTRPG industry that are making over $100,000.
I have some beefs with Bob's numbers, but if anybody else wants to go first.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that, because the numbers of successful Kickstarters, you know, were greater than I thought there would be, right? And the fact that there were more non 5e related Kickstarters, at least recently, than there were 5e Kickstarters. So I thought that was just good for the overall health of the hobby.
I can maybe predict some of your criticisms of the data being incomplete, perhaps. But I do think it all points of, and I think he actually acknowledges some of them maybe towards the end of his video. A lot of this is a black box. We're not getting every, we have to draw lines somewhere, and we're not seeing everybody's financial statements. But to me, it seems very clear that this is where we are in peak golden age moments now. Maybe not for D&D, but for TTRPGs in general, which personally I think I'm for on a personal level. I also think what doesn't get acknowledged in that video or like really anywhere is that we're in between editions right now. And as much as they try to dodge the drop off that happens at the end of an edition by pretending that this is not a new edition, that's 100% what it was. If you were going to make a 5e product and you didn't decide to make it to rip out every element of the OGL a couple of years ago, you dragged your feet to wait to see what 5.5 looked like. So I think that goes to explain some of that dip. You want to see what the new thing is, and there's just more interest from the consumer side of things too. Fewer people, I mean, I've told players for the last like year or so, if you were new to the hobby, like, hey, don't buy anything right now because it's all about to change. Like I've told half a dozen people that, like, don't buy the PHB. There's going to be a new one. We'll see what it looks like. And that's a small sample size, but that's happening everywhere. So at the end of 5th edition, people stop buying 5e to wait to see what the shiny new thing's going to be. We've known for years that it was coming. It wasn't like a surprise drop. I think maybe they did successfully to a degree like mitigate the impact of that, but that is something that is a big market trend that doesn't get pointed at as a factor, I think, in that Bob video.
Well, he did point out the fact that there is no SRD for 5.5 yet. And without an SRD, right, then it's hard to make 5.5 content. So I think those two things go hand in hand, like what you just said, Ryan, about the drop off of 5e and the fact that there's not a good tool to build 5.5 content on. And I'm sure a lot of people were kind of waiting to see, because I'm not going to sink a whole bunch of my time into a 5.5 product if 5.5 is going to go the way of 4th edition, right? So I think there's a lot of wait and see right now, but that doesn't seem to have stopped the momentum of non-D&D Kickstarters out there. There still seems to be a lot of people out there that are making, other TTRPG content.
So here's my problem with the numbers. I love you, Bob, but the numbers, Bob's video does a good job of, he shows numbers like in 2014, there were $0 million TTRPG Kickstarters. In 2015, there was 2016, 17, and then he shows a 2018 forward, it's like 1, 2, 5, 12, 15 million plus Kickstarters or backer kits. And the problem is the data doesn't normalize just for Kickstarter's popularity and public awareness of Kickstarter. Because if you took a bunch of people in 2014 and asked them, do you know you can buy TTRPGs on Kickstarter, versus a bunch of people in 2024 and ask them that same question, a lot more people in 2024 know you can go to Kickstarter to buy tabletop content there. Whereas I just think people weren't nearly as aware of that. I'm not saying that TTRPG popularity is waning. It's just that Kickstarter has become, over the last 10 years, a viable place other than the friendly local game store or D&D Beyond, or where else? Where does the average person get games other than that? They have no idea. Most people don't know about the DM's Guild or Drive Through RPG or itch.io, you know. So I think the public consciousness, when every time Brandon Sanderson does a Kickstarter, and all of a sudden millions of people are aware that you can get this stuff there. So I just think that probably explains it more than tabletop games being more culturally relevant than they were. People waiting for Stranger Things season 5 to give D&D a boost, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be another big boost like season 1. It was a big boost in season 1 because everybody had forgotten about D&D.
Mm-hmm.
Fans of the show remember D&D now. So anyway, that's my cloud up and rain all over this parade.
I would like to see it tracking Kickstarter's growth too. Like that should be a line on that graph.
Yeah.
Well, but there's a possibility that this is a parallel process as well, right? That the Kickstarter model lends itself very well to the TTRPG community, right? Because the hardest part about doing an RPG product, is the finishing of it, right? The art and the layout and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of us where the design end is not the hard part, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but Kickstarter allows you basically to pre-order, right? And therefore pay for the art, design, and layout stuff. And that was something that was really the heartbreaker part of the Fantasy Heartbreaker, is how much time and effort you would put in to actually getting a marketable product, only to find out that, nobody wanted it, right? Where here with Kickstarter, you can collect the money on the front end, know how much money you're working with, and finish the, accordingly.
It's really kind of a grift, isn't it?
Hey, shut up. I've done a Kickstarter.
Give us the money first, then you might get the product later. But for this industry, it's great because traditionally, with a few very small exceptions, most tabletop games are not made by the companies that have the kind of capital to pay for stuff up front. If you take out TSR, Paizo, and now MCDM, pretty much everything else that's ever been made has been made by people who had a shoestring budget and bootstrapped and probably barely were able to get it out the door. So the economics of it is way much more in favor of the industry now.
And here's something too, without naming names, a failed Kickstarter, like you invest money if you're going to run a Kickstarter. I'm a rinky-dink guy in a tiny room, and I invested in the Kickstarter process. I also know of people who had successful Kickstarters and it ruined them because they sold a bunch of things that they had to make. A lot of this happened during the early COVID era, where all of a sudden it costs twice as much to make a book. It costs 4 times to ship a book. And now you're on the hook for all these units that you've pre-sold. You can't walk away from it. So that was success on Kickstarter can actually spell the end for people if they're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I do think it's a good, if imperfect, litmus test, a little dipstick into the community. And can you put the graph up one more time? I think one point that a lot of people, what I see here is a non-zero sum game. There's a lot of folks who are on their branch of the TTRPG ecosphere trying to cut it away from 5th edition because for reasons that I am sympathetic to a lot of the time. But the idea that D&D cratering over time is going to be good for TTRPGs, I think is inaccurate. A little dip, sure. Maybe in a short term in 2024, people who would have invested money in something else of a 5e product are now going to go look at a Shadow Dark or, insert your favorite here. But over time, D&D is the engine driving new people. I want that starter set to be fantastic to bring in new people, to get eyeballs on the system, even if I myself never intend to play it, or I fundamentally want, I think ethically it's better for people to be playing other games. The more people who buy that 5.5 starter set in the next year or two, it's a lagging indicator, but years after that fact, those are the people who are going to be buying third-party products on a Kickstarter. And that's really important to keep in mind when the emotions run hot and we're mad at Hasbro. D&D is the big blinking light over the, like, unless you have played Dungeons and Dragons, odds are you don't know, you don't get the tater pig joke. Straight up. Like, it's the entry point, and we want that ramp to be healthy and wide. Or at least I do, because I want a thriving community rather than to feel like I'm right.
Yep. Well, and that was part of what Mike Merles was alluding to. We talked about the Mike Merles stuff last week, right? Or week before last. That was something, Merles was alluding to, is that, D&D is not dead, right? It's not going to go away. And that's overall a good thing. Like Ryan was just saying. But, the reality is, it really seems like, Wizards of the Coast looked at, the 2020, 2021 years and projected out this, plan, based on the numbers that they were selling so much content in 2020, 2021, not thinking, the context of the pandemic. And they launched this big old plan, and that plan doesn't seem to be working very well. And like Mike was saying, this is a big company. It's going to take a while for them to correct course. And so, I think it's very clear that we're going to experience a significant dip in D&D, right? But I don't think it's going to be detrimental to the industry. And I think that's what, at least my takeaway from these numbers is hopefully, like Ryan was just saying, the industry is going to do fine for a while by itself, and D&D is going to recover and bounce back, and then we'll be at a new homeostasis, whatever that homeostasis looks like. It will be a new homeostasis with how popular is D&D and how popular is everything else.
I really liked in that The Economist video, he asked Ginny D about the OGL, and all she said was, there are some people who've made their whole personalities about hating Wizards of the Coast.
Insightful.
It was a good answer.
Say what you will about Ginny D. She's very good at what she does. She knows what she's talking about. I think, there's success is a double-edged sword. Gender has at least two edges. We don't have to get down that road. But that she is a stand-in for so much stuff, like unfairly. Like, I'm sure you could criticize her for good reasons, but most of the criticism is ridiculous and is misdirect. She takes flack for WotC, which is bananas, because she was at the forefront leading she used her platform well in the ethical sense of the term and in the practical sense of the term. When shit hit the fan, she did very well. So don't yell at her.
What I'll say about Jenny is she and I live in the same city. She's done a couple of these meet and greets at Wizard's Chest, a very popular nerd place here in Denver. And both times I had something else to do that night. So we live in the same city. I've never met her. Let's move on unless we want to say other things about Ginny D. Our topic today, Ginny D. Do we like her? Yes, we like her. Of course we do.
Well, we did talk about her for 15, 20 seconds, so now we can put her on the thumbnail. And really...
Yes. Cha-ching! All right, moving on. Have either of you heard of the classic tabletop board game Terraforming Mars?
I have. I've actually, it's on my short list of board games I want to play.
Yeah, it's in the new modern era of board games, post Catan kind of board games. Like, what's the bird one that was super Wingspan? In the
Wingspan's great.
Wingspan era, I've heard great things about Wingspan. It looks pretty complex, but I haven't played Wingspan. But Terraforming Mars is getting turned into a TTRPG. And so I think this is kind of cool. It's one of the most popular board games, so this might onboard a lot of people into the hobby. From that way, from people who are really into terraforming or really into playing Martian Soldier, and then now they can, instead of just moving tokens around a little board, they can actually be a real Martian Soldier. And it's on Backer Kit. Hold on, I don't have that link pulled up here. Talk amongst yourselves. Oh wait, it's over here. Yeah. That it says funded in 5 minutes.
Wow.
But it was only £9,000 or euros. Sorry, 9,000 euros was their goal. So
Yeah, should I spill some more Kickstarter tea?
please.
You can make that number. You can make that number say whatever you want, and then you can say that you funded in however quickly you
Yeah.
want to say.
Yeah, so that's Terraforming Mars. Let's simply hit play here. It's not. Let me mute this so we don't get in trouble. I don't really know a whole
I like
lot
it. It's
about.
got hexes.
It's got a HUD. It must be good. Uh, I don't have a whole lot to say about this game. None of us have played it.
Hey, it looks cool.
Hey, everybody. I'm curious, and maybe this is better served as like next week's roundtable discussion. But there seems to be, to me, a surprising gap between fantasy RPGs and sci-fi RPGs. And I played a couple sci-fi RPGs. I know they're out there. Feel free to tell me your favorites, as long as it's not Traveler. The thing is, like, in media, in nerd culture in general, I would guess that sci-fi is way bigger in most other spaces. So is it just the D&D legacy? Am I missing something? Is my premise fundamentally wrong and I'm just like not hanging out with the sci-fi kids? Or like, why do you think that is? Is there something innately better about fantasy that serves a TTRPG space that you can't do in sci-fi settings?
I
think
think.
Go ahead, Brad. We're probably going to say the same thing, but you go ahead.
I think world building in fantasy is more forgiving than world building in sci-fi.
Oh.
I think as the game master, of course you can't play a TTRPG without a game master, right? As a game master, I think it's a little intimidating to try to, embrace sci-fi world building because there's pressure to make it make sense. I think that's one of the barriers to running sci-fi games.
That is a very convincing point to me. Counterpoint, Star Wars.
Right. So you can do science fantasy, right?
Right.
But yeah, hard sci-fi is a little tougher to do, unless you have a good game that spells it out for you, or you have a game with a very narrow focus, like Alien or Mothership, right, where it's like sci-fi horror. That allows you to have that narrow focus because you're really more about the horror, and sci-fi is just the dressing.
So you think say tabletop game players or even readers of fiction are more likely to accept magic as an answer than they are to accept technology as an answer, or a vague magic system than they are to accept a vague technology system?
Yeah, I mean, well, let me give you a scenario where like you have that like wise ass player who knows a lot about science, and then they're like, well, does the ship have this chemical and does the ship have that substance? Then I should be able to build a bomb that's so big it does, 80 D100 damage or whatever, you know. And I think that can intimidate folks.
I'm intimidated now.
Yeah. I know this when I was a little kid and I watched my older brother and his friends playing Tater Pigs. I first saw them playing D&D, but then a lot of my memories are of them playing Star Frontiers. They played Star Frontiers more than D&D for sure. So, that was the 80s. I was going to say, I think that if they had come out with Star Trek, the TTRPG in the late 60s, we would all be playing that instead of D&D. D&D came first. They missed the ball with the original series role-playing game. We would all be in Starfleet Academy instead of swinging swords at mimics.
So you think just the genre was set by whatever the first big popular game was?
Yeah, it was also, when D&D came out, was also in the middle of a Lord of the Rings revival. Like, Lord of the Rings was huge in the 70s. It had come out, the 50s, 40s? When did it come out
No, well,
originally?
it's inspired in part by his World War II experience. No, World War I experience,
I
I should say.
Well, anyway, it had been out for a while
I'm
and
not
was
getting
having a
close.
resurgence, and D&D came out, right at that time. So
Yeah,
I think that had a lot to do with it.
I remember that because I was a kid in the 70s and my dad and all his friends were reading Lord of the Rings for the first time.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin, half their songs are about Mordor. And that's, yeah, exactly, Nacho. Nacho and I, similar minds.
It's about love and hobbits.
And meeting fair girls in Mordor. All right. So, moving on. Brad, you got anything you want to plug?
I got a new video that just dropped today that's a synthesis of the Mike Merle's discussions. And so I took a couple of Mike Merle's interviews and our discussions from this show, smashed them all together in one 20-minute cut. So if you haven't seen all those Mike Merle videos, you can get the down and dirty version in 20 minutes.
Nice. All right, so moving on now to our roundtable discussion. Chat, you can finally start typing. I know you've been holding back this whole time. So we are going to talk about the TPK. I'm thinking now we probably won't have time to also discuss this. So let's merge this with the Creator Corner. Let's just talk about all the TPK stuff together. So we're probably not. Also, just want to prepare everyone. We might not have time to get to our main topic of the second chapter of 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. We're going to do our best, though. So, total party kills. We all know what that is. It's when everybody in the party dies. That is definition provided by Webster's Dictionary. Now, how do we handle total party kills? There was also a video from Brennan Lee Mulligan where he did D&D tech support, and he talked about TPKs. Who wants to go first to share their TPK, or should we should look at the polls, actually. I know what I'm doing. I'm a professional. Let's look at the polls. So we put out a couple of polls. Ryan put up a poll and I put up a poll earlier this week. How do you handle TPKs? Oh no,
You didn't vote on my poll, man? You didn't vote?
Busted.
You didn't even like it. You didn't like my poll, man.
Oh God, fine.
My
Okay,
example.
4% would never TPK. 36%, that's how the dice go. That's how the dice go. 55% said only if a party makes terrible choices, and 5% said other. Do you want to summarize the comments on this one for us, Ryan? Do you have any trends to point out?
A fairly good smattering, and a lot of the people who are in chat are represented up here. Yeah, it vacillated. I think that the two winners, the two leaders are, if the dice say that's what happened, that's what's happening. And the players generally have to make a mistake or a series of bad choices in order to get there. And I think there's probably a little more overlap between those two answers than the structure of a poll maybe allows for. I think if you're running if death is on the table in your game, which it's not for some people who are very narratively driven, but if you're interested in like the strategic part of things, or you've been playing for a while and you want to up the narrative impact of some things, then yeah, I think a lot of experienced dungeon masters open the door to death. And once that door's open, sometimes it's very hard to shut in the middle. Like sometimes it's rare that you design a TPK, to put it mildly, right? If you're like going out to kill all of your players, you're probably not going to have players for a very long time. Or let's player characters. If you kill all your players, then yeah, you don't have any more players and you have an arrest warrant. If you kill all the characters, people aren't going to keep coming back. But if he dies, he dies. There was one comment that made me. I started to type up a response and I wanted to do it here instead. This Vincent here. How does a TPK happen if it's not intentional by the GM? And I think that belies the fact that like we all assume we're playing the same game and we're not. Like I roll in the open, so like everybody knows what the dice say. I have removed the ability for me to fudge. I have a lot of mechanisms I can still use to control the flow of things, but like I've had TPKs happened unintentionally. There were warning signs. I could have done some things to like break the narrative to save the game in some ways. But yeah, I've never intentionally set out to do it. And I'm worried if people do. But yeah, I think the longer you run and the more experience you have, the more you surrender control.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's this idea with new players that like a more experienced dungeon master is more in control, is more expertly just puppet mastering every element of things. But at least in my experience, the more and more I play and run things, the less and less tightly I'm holding the steering wheel.
Yeah, like Ryan said, you can still tweak the dials without fudging the dice. That's really the secret. You don't have to fudge the dice to pull back and pull your punches a little bit, you know. Especially once you get to higher levels and monsters have things like multi-attack. You don't always have to have them take that second attack. Especially if they crit on the first one. You don't have to fudge the dice. The other poll came out to be roughly 47. Oh, no. My people are a little less forgiving, Ryan, than yours. 47% said if that's how the dice goes, then that's how the dice go. Notice what I didn't do is put in an option here for it depends on the situation. If I had added that option, 90% of people would have picked that one. Mm-hmm. I wanted to force people into a hard choice here.
Yeah.
But still, a lot of the comments said, it depends on the situation. If I'm running for kids, it's going to be different than if I'm running for my buddies. I don't know. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I've done all those things over the years, and I agree with Ryan that when I was a younger, less experienced DM, I definitely fudged dice and was very careful not to, push the limits of whatever system I was running. Like I definitely was, in favor of the players and the narrative. And as I've gotten older and more experienced, I'm with you, Ryan. Like, roll the dice in the open, let the dice help tell the story. Don't try to control as many things. And, so I definitely have gotten to the point where I let the players have more choice and more freedom, and the dice really do determine a decent chunk of, the combat.
In that video with Brendan Lee Mulligan that we're not going to have time to talk about, he said, one of the questions is about TPKs, and he said, the best way is to stop it before it starts, which sounds good but isn't really helpful advice. But what he said is, if your party's about to go into a lethal encounter, you can tell them. This is like what we were talking about 30 minutes ago. Sometimes clarity is more important than immersion. And you can step outside of this to say, hey guys, you're all pretty low on resources, and that dragon over there looks really angry. And then from that point, once you've given them the information, then if they TPK, it's more from a bad choice they've made than bad encounter design or any kind of entrapment. I think it's entirely reasonable to discuss this in a session 0. It's entirely reasonable to say, hey gang, if you stumble into a combat that's too tough and everyone dies, what would you want to do? And then people might say, well, we should just pop back up like a save scum. And you can say, okay, but it might feel, less, the stakes are going to be, you can have these kind of conversations about what's appropriate to happen. And then if the players say, we don't care about a TPK, then you're off the hook, throw whatever monsters you want at them. Or people might have individual feelings about their characters. People get attached to their PCs and some people don't. I don't know the psychological differences between those two personality types, but you can talk about this stuff up top. And then people may not like having their PCs die, but they shouldn't have their feelings hurt if they know it could happen, right? No one should feel betrayed by a PC death if they know it's a possibility.
Yeah, and I feel like my players definitely they want the lethality to the game. And the other thing is, like, you can trust your players. Like I don't really ever fear that my players are going to, get too far in over their heads. Um, you know, they'll find a way to get out of a situation. If they get themselves in a bad situation, they might have to run, but that's their choice. And I've definitely had times where like players knew, okay, this is getting really rough, and they chose to stay in the fight, right? Because there's always the opportunity to run from the fight. And I can remember being a player and having a total party kill, and we knew we were probably going to die going into that situation. We knew it was an overpowered NPC that was supposed to just be there to scare us and deliver whatever information we needed. And we took offense to something he said, and we're like, no, we're going to take this guy out. And we chose to kill our characters in the process of killing this NPC. Like, that was our conscious choice. My character smashed the roof and brought the roof down on top of all of us in order to take the NPC out, because we decided he was a real bad guy and needed to go, and sacrificed our lives in order to do it. We brought the TPK on ourselves.
This is funny that Fred mentions this. I asked them if they want to play a new character or the same character. Well, this is interesting. I was in a TPK about 6 months ago, maybe 9 months ago now. High level. We all died. One of the players said, no, I just want to bring back my old character. And the DM said, all right, I guess. So we were all new characters except for the one character. We were like, I guess he just didn't die. All right, hand. It ended up working out fine. Nobody cared.
In a game with magic and a pantheon of gods that will intercede on your behalf, and several canonical versions of what an afterlife looks like and how to return from it, like, there are ways. And the old joke of, like, I am this guy's brother and pick up his sword, like, that comes from somewhere. And it's, even if it's not sentimental, it's like practical, like, we're level 12, I'm not going to cook up a character right now, like, we got 2 hours left, I'll play the same guy and pretend he has a different name. There's two sides to it.
One of the comments on my poll, I don't remember who, somebody said that if there's a TPK, everyone comes back, but they lose a level permanently. So they have to come back to the same part of the adventure, and it will be harder because they're all under-leveled now. Which, that seems fair to me. That seems like a fair, like, you could work that out with your players. Like, if you die, there's got to be consequences. Maybe you lose a level.
Yeah, me personally, I wouldn't like that. That feels too video gamey for me if I was a player in that campaign. Um, but yeah, I mean, I could totally see doing that. It's like, yeah, I mean, that literally happens in video games, right? Your experience bar is at 90% and you die. You're like, well, crap. You basically just lost a level, right? You were so close to leveling up, you know. So, I don't think it's bad design. It just wouldn't be my personal preference.
Right. Well, I think we might have run out of time.
Yeah, I don't think we should
Gosh.
pop anything else.
I'm sorry, everyone. I don't know how this happened. We run out of time.
Do you have too much banter?
Oh no!
I'm going to do some statistical analysis on our banter and present you with some stats of.
I want
banter
quantitative
to-
and qualitative separated out.
I'll have that on your desk by Monday.
I think the correlation between like me letting go as a dungeon master, also as a player, like Brad describing going out in a blaze of glory is peak D&D to me. That is not like a fail state. That is a satisfying conclusion to a campaign, which is so hard to obtain otherwise. Like, what's the plan? We're all going to go out in a blaze of glory, or we're going to continue playing until somebody moves or their schedule changes or has a kid, and then these characters are in limbo forever.
Yep.
Children
I
run
actually
D&D.
I actually have a regular player who loves going out in a blaze of glory. Like he acted, and now it's become like a mini game within the game, where like he's trying to get his character killed. He wants his character to go out in a blaze of glory, and the rest of the party is like, nope, not this time. So they're always coming up with creative ways to like heal him just in a nick of time, or grapple him and drag him out of the room before something blows up.
Like Kenny from South Park.
Yeah, it's like inverted Kenny.
Nice. All right, everyone. Hey, thank you for watching. There's nothing coming up after the show today. You're free to do whatever you want with the rest of your day. You're welcome. But we are the Landlocked Warlocks, and this has been Casual Friday. Thank you for watching. I'm GM Jim. These guys are...
I'm Brad Wolf from Diarden.
I'm Ryan Doyle. And Dolly!
Say bye to Dolly,
Dolly!
everyone.
Hit the
And,
like button for Dolly!
Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.